Hello and welcome to this Braxis Holdout and Warhead Junction retrospective. So in this video I'm going to look at the maps when they came out, what changes they've received since then, where they are now, and what changes I would like to do to them basically. So diving right into it, the maps when they came out. I think first off it's important to understand the context. So these will be the first maps that the game has seen in ages when they came out. I think the last map was Towers, and that was about 10 months before. But not only that, Towers was also a weird map. It was kind of gimmicky. Obviously, you couldn't directly attack the core. There were no forts or keeps or anything. Just the bell towers and the altars. And for some people, that made it a great map. It's actually probably my favorite map. But for others, they weren't so big fans of it. So for that 10-month gap, they didn't really have anything. So when they announced that 2 maps were coming, people got pretty hyped. And it was also a big event. It was Machines of War. It was StarCraft coming to the Nexus. StarCraft is a big universe, obviously, one of Blizzard's biggest. StarCraft 2, one of their biggest active games as well. So it was quite a big deal that it was coming, and it came with Alarak, which is probably the second most anticipated StarCraft character. So, all in all, there's a lot of hype around these maps, and people with quite high expectations. So, when they release, the first one was Braxis, and that had quite a few issues upon release. So, the Zerg wave was far too strong early in the game. And it was just absolutely destroying. You could sometimes core off the first Zerg wave. That was ridiculous. And it was also very weak late. So if both teams, they kind of had good clear and the other team didn't push and stuff like this, then you ended up in this situation where the Zerg wave would just get cleared by like Sylvanas W and Valor multi-shot. So definitely scaling issues. And the other issue was there was cheese that hadn't really been figured out yet, like figuring out how to play against it. So stuff like Sylvanas, stuff like Gul'dan in that 4 lane, Rexar in that top lane, just tended to win the game a lot of the time because the enemy team didn't know how to deal with it. And then people started picking those and they didn't know how to play them, and it was just really weird draft situation kind of. So the community, it really weren't too big a fan of Braxis at release. There's actually a top 10 of all-time Reddit thread that was just saying, Blizzard, please make the 0% Zerg wave stronger. And somehow that was in the top 10. And obviously the subreddit was smaller then than it was at the game's release and all these other factors. And the fact that got upvoted so highly shows there was a lot of discontent towards the map. So then Warhead releases. Also lots of issues. So the early nukes, the center's doing 100% bonus damage at this point, and since there's no linear scaling, the level 1 nukes are just insane. So it's like killing forts like straight off. Not only that, there was the 14-minute power spike, and at 14 minutes 3 nukes would just end the game. So that was just ridiculous. And then even worse, obviously, when you looked at the draft, there was a lot of cheese that not only was it not figured out, it was just legitimately too strong. So that triple global meta, where you'd go into the draft and just pick as many globals as possible, and then win the game, because obviously globals were not only much stronger back then, they've been through 2 cycles of nerfs since that point, but also people didn't know how to play the map yet. So people weren't setting up around the objectives, people didn't know the timers, and that just made it not great either. Again, there was a bit of community backlash, and lots of pros were not very big fans. There have been 2 sets of show matches. The first was at Gamescom itself, and the second was a few weeks after. And every single show match that was played ended at 14 minutes as soon as the nukes got their power spike, and one team just run at core. And core with 2 of them. So, yeah, a lot of issues on release. So since then, obviously, there's been some changes. So on Braxis Holdout, they reworked the way that the Zerg scale. So they upped their base, and they cut the early game scaling drastically, like significant reductions. And that meant that the first Zergrave was no longer taking a keep. Sometimes it couldn't even take a fort. So that's much healthier, I'd say. It was around the same in the mid game, and then they were slightly stronger late game. They buffed the health a lot and the damage slightly in the late game. So yeah, some good changes there. And then slightly after, there was the initial Zergrave buff. I'd say mostly because of the feedback that we were talking about earlier from that Reddit thread. From 3 Zerglings to 6 Zerglings. So Warhead saw, I'd say, a few more changes. So the first was the inner circle bonus was reduced from 100% to only 50%. And the nuke damage upgrade time was moved from 14 minutes to 18 minutes. So that was to stop the level 1 nukes just killing a fort straight up. And also walls as well. And it was also to stop the 14-minute core rush with just 2 or 3 nukes. So a good change there, but that was only a stepping stone because a few patches after we got the nukes now scale linearly. So the inner damage bonus was increased back up from 50% to 70%, but it now scaled, I think it was 70 damage every minute. So it worked out roughly, it was the same, like 18 to 19. It was a bit weaker in the early, but in the mid it got a bit stronger. And it was overall a much more even curve that was much easier to deal with, I'd say. So, issues that we still have today. So on Braxis Holdout, I personally believe that the map is far too reflective of the draft. I would say at the highest level of Hero League and also competitive, the better draft has a 95% chance to win almost regardless of skill. Like, because there are so little opportunities to show skill early in the game, since it's a 4v4, an elongated 4v4 lane that usually necessitates a high sustain healer. So trades don't matter that much because you will have a high sustain healer. You might have a second support down there as well. So bad trades aren't being punished. Good trades aren't being rewarded. So again, very low opportunity for skill there. The beacons themselves, they obviously just swap forwards and backwards. If you have an even draft, then what that usually means is that one team has a stronger top side and the other team has a stronger bot side. So you end up both teams having one beacon and the beacon's not moving. So again, there's not much opportunity for skill there. And just in general, since it's a 1v1 lane, if you're on the losing side of that lane, you just sit back, take the XP at your towers, not much skill. If you're on the winning side, you just stay there. So all in all, again, not really many opportunities for skill to step in here, but the better draft, if you win both sides of the map, I'd say you have a 95% chance or more to just win the game off of that. And I think that's very unhealthy. So my second issue is that one mistake on the first beacon phase a few minutes in can just end the game. So let's say that you're in that 4v4 lane, you have the stronger top side, and you get one kill. So you take a fight, you know, one of your people almost dies, but it's fine because you've got Malfurion, so you can heal him back up. One person on the enemy team does die. So you control the beacons. You get the Zergrave. From that Zergrave, you can most likely take either 2 walls or a wall and a fort. Again, I think that's kind of conservative. You can sometimes take more if you have a really good draft. If you have the weaker draft or slightly weaker, or you don't have any push but you do have good lane, then sure, you can get less, but I think on average, when played almost correctly and with even drafts, you can probably get at least a 0.75 to 1.25 level lead. And again, that is conservative, definitely. Now, the issue is that the losing team, there are no plays that they can make to recover that XP. And I'll try and go through some. So, you're down, and you say, okay, let's force a fight. Now, you can't really force a fight because the enemy team has no objectives to do either. So, okay, let's push a wall, but then you're in a situation where you're under their wall, and that's not a good fight for you. So you can't take that, especially if you're down, let's say, a level, and you don't even have stat advantage. So you can't do that. You can't force at one of their mercenaries because they will just give it up because the mercenaries don't do much. The fire bats or hell bats, well, they are tanky. They don't do much damage, so they can just be cleared up at wall, almost no problem. And then the Goliaths are very squishy, so they can be cleared up again once they hit the wall. And then you have to take the fight at the wall, which you can't do because it's not advantageous. So there's no opportunity for you to force a fight. Okay, so you can take the mercenaries, but as we just went over, the mercenaries don't mean anything. So even if you go and take your own and you try and push with them, you're probably not going to get much. At best, you're going to get a wall. But if they were playing it properly, then they would have traded their mercenaries and they'd be over the other side of the map. You can't make a play like, let's just force this wall here, because the enemy team will trade it, or indeed be in range to respond. On a map like Cursed Hollow, you can say, okay, we lost that first tribute and we lost 2 people. So for the second one, we're going to make up some XP. So let's soak all 3 lanes and get a 3-man pushing top. And with that, you can take the wall, make up the XP, but now you're 2 tributes down. So you're still at a disadvantage, but you had a play to make to put you back on even footing. On Braxis, there is no such play that you can make like that. So you will always be down that XP. I think that's just a fact of the map being too small and there not being enough on it. And I'm not sure how you solve either of those issues. I think that's just an inherent issue that you can work around if you focus on other areas. So the enemy team, the one that's about 1 level up, if they're playing this correctly, they can elongate it a bit, because when they hit 7 and the enemy team 6 and stuff like this, you can take more. Obviously, if that happened during the Zerg wave, then you would have taken possibly a keep tower, stuff like this. So they'd still be about 1 level. If they played it really well, they could be up to 2 levels by now. I'd say that's optimistic. I think 1 level is generally where they would be. So it's 10 versus 9. They force the boss. The boss is very quick to die. It deals a lot of damage. But since 9 versus 10 is such a significant power spike, they cannot lose that fight. No matter what. No matter how much damage they take from the boss and stuff like that, it doesn't matter. Because 10 is a huge power spike. So they force the boss with the 10 advantage. So that boss, because it goes to the strongest lane, it goes down the lane that your first Zerg wave didn't go down. Your first Zerg wave went down bot, let's say. You got the fort there. The boss now goes top. Now, the boss, because of his pathing, kills the wall before attacking it. So whether you got the wall or not, it doesn't matter too much. Gives them a bit of extra time if you didn't. But again, since it takes no damage, it's not especially impactful. And then it can take the fort. Now, if you have a wave and you have 5 people there zoning, it's going to take no damage on the fort either. So that means, with this boss, you just got a free keep wall. Now, with that keep wall, you push yourself to a 2-level advantage. Now, what happens then is, if this was all timed very well by the winning team, then they can now capture both beacons with that level 10 advantage. If it was not timed so well, then they still have a 2-level lead at this point, because they got either a keep or at least keep wall with this boss. And so now what happens is they can stall it out. And again, since it's a map where you have to have both beacons, they can just avoid the fight. And it shouldn't matter if they give up, let's say 40% while they're soaking 13, because the 40% doesn't affect how strong their Zerg wave will be pushing down top lane, which is now a win condition. Because it is either an exposed keep, which they can take with talent advantage, or there is no keep and it's an open core. So eventually that Zerg wave is now going to give them between a 2 and 4 level lead, or just flat out win the game. And all of that happened without almost any options from the losing team because of one death in the early game. Again, this does need a high level of play from the winning team to execute all of that, but that's the kind of stuff that happens at high level play, right? So, yeah, I think that's incredibly unhealthy for the game. So, looking at Warhead now. The early game is inconsequential. So let's say that one team has a really good start. They get like a 1 to 2 level lead. And then from that, they end up in a really good position. It doesn't really matter because the way that the nukes spawn, you can almost always get some, even as the losing team. A 1-for-1 trade is not unrealistic when you're not down a talent tier. If it's 4 nukes that spawn, getting 1 is likely, getting 2 is realistic, even though you're down a talent tier, just because of the way the map works. And the way that you actually have plays to make, the losing team has plays to make. And they can outplay the opponent, even though they're down levels, and get the same amount of nukes, basically. So a later nuke, because of the way that scaling works, can do the same damage as 2 or 3 earlier nukes. And hero scale as well, so they factor in. Let's say that the enemy team used 2 nukes to take down the top fort. Later in the game, a single person can get 1 nuke, cast it on top fort, and then finish it off themselves because they're stronger. In the early game, you either need to commit maybe 3 people and 2 nukes, or 1 person and 3 nukes to take that fort. So again, you can see, the later the game goes, the more nukes are effective, and that means that the early game is less significant, because you can just catch up in those structures by getting the nukes, which you kind of always get. Now, once both teams are above level 16, the game is basically even, other than that slight stat advantage, because, again, the structures have disappeared to the nukes, but also the game can end for either team at this point, almost regardless of structures. And I'll show you how. So here's our scenario. It's level 16 versus level 18. The level 18 team makes 1 mistake. Monk misses palm on anyone. Yeah, let's say a Thor. Thor dies because of that. So the level 16 team just waits out 3 seconds, finishes off Thor. In the chase, they also happen to get the Malfurion because... Oh, sorry, not Malfurion. The Johanna, because Johanna ended up being unstoppable and she was trying to save Thor. So they get the 2 kills. Now, the nukes were either already spawned on the map, or they started spawning during the team fight. It doesn't matter, because the level 16 team at this point, they know that they are behind and they need to force a play. So they can force on this 4 nuke spawn, because they know that they need to make a play here, and they know that the game's basically even. So they force in aggressively. The options that the level 18 team has is not take a fight and lose 3 nukes, or to take a fight and potentially win the game. So usually the level 18 team obviously doesn't give up 3 nukes, they opt to take the fight. So what happens now is the level 16 team, after winning that team fight, they get the 3 nukes, and then they start the boss. Now, it doesn't actually matter particularly how low they were from the team fight, because the boss does no damage at all to anyone that isn't the tank, and all the tank needs is a single hot from mouth, and he can gain health while doing that entire boss. So, not only does it do low damage, it only does damage to 1 person. It does spawn locusts, and during that time it doesn't damage anything, because the locusts should never hit a player, ever. That means that the enemy team cannot contest it, basically. So, they've got the 3 nukes already, they now get the boss, and they start marching down bot. Now, as I was saying earlier, a single nuke later can do what some nukes did earlier. And since that probably happened already, the bot fort will have no towers at least. It will have no wall. Maybe it will still be standing, but if it is, since there are now still 5 enemy heroes, they can go straight on the fort and kill it, no problems. So the boss takes no damage. So now what happens is the level 16 team blows 2 nukes on the core, on the keep side. So the first one, they hit the walls and the keep. The second one hits only the keep. What that does is that's going to kill the wall. So the boss is still full HP, marches straight through the wall. You're going to need to finish off the towers. They'll both be about 10 to 20% each. The keep then dies almost. That's also going to be about 10 to 15% HP. And the tower on the keep is going to die as well. There will be a 90+% boss marching on the core. And this is the strongest boss in the game. And this is a guaranteed win condition in all but the most colossal of mess ups for the level 16 team. And so what we see there is another scenario where the team that was ahead lost off of one mistake. And again, I do really think that that's very unhealthy. They know that they can lose, sure, but the alternative is to give up 3 nukes, which isn't any better. So I think that's just bad map design. So obviously I'm not one to just sit here and point out problems and not try and give solutions. So here are the changes that I would make to both maps to try and fix these issues. So Braxis first. So the issues that I think there are with the map is that there's a lack of plays to be made in the laning phase. The force boss, level 10v9, gives too much, and the draft is too impactful. So, solutions. So the lack of plays to be made, what I would do here is I would try making the mercenaries on the map give a ton of XP when captured. So what this gives is this gives the losing team the chance to farm them to catch up, and the enemy team has to invade to try and stop the losing team catching up. When they invade, that is then a favorable fight for the losing team. So what we have here is not only have we given more plays for both sides here, but we've given a chance for the losing team to catch up through this system as well. So yeah, I think that'd be a really healthy change for the map. So the second issue is forcing boss level 10 verse 9. It just gives too much. So to counteract this, I would actually make the boss spawn for the first time at 10 minutes. Bosses usually spawn between 4 and 5. I think it varies. So what that would do is that would stop any early boss rushing shenanigans that obviously, in my opinion, unbalance the map and pave the way for these very quick games with no chance to come back from the losing team. That would stop those kind of rushes. But what that would also do is that would allow the developers much more freedom in the power level. Maybe at 10 minutes when this thing spawns, that's when its scaling starts. So 10 minutes, it's still quite weak, very squishy, very high damage maybe. And then as it gets later into the game, it becomes very, very tanky, but its damage goes down. So again, you have much more freedom with its power level, and that can create more dynamic choices during the game, because it would do something different, depending on when you were to cap it. So the third and last issue that I have is that the draft is too impactful. So I think the reason why this is because winning both lanes directly equals the Zerg wave. And there's nothing else to draft for, because the lanes equal the objective, which is not the case in any other map. And then the objective equals the pushing. So I think, again, going back to our solution earlier, Mercs giving a ton of XP, that would help here as well. But also, I would rework the mercenary pathing so that they are able to help deal with the Zerg wave. So, and I would maybe give them 200% bonus damage against Zerg or something like that. So let's say that you go and do your hard camp. Your hard camp then spawns from your base, and it comes out of, let's say, the keep gates and marches down the lane, and that can help start depushing the Zerg wave, and you can help defend it. And what that would do is that would give the teams the opportunity to draft towards these merc camps. So that would in turn make the Zerg waves less impactful, because and that would in turn make the lanes less impactful, while also giving a second thing to draft for. And I think that would really help balance out the map. Still keep its core. Zerg wave is what matters. Beacons are what matters. But giving that kind of opportunity, I think, would make it much easier to draft as a team, and then make it much harder to get out-drafted so drastically. Moving on to Warhead. Again, so the issues. So the early game is unimpactful. Boss plus 2 nukes can end the game when the enemy still has keep all up. And the boss is the easiest to take in the game, but the strongest once captured. The reason that's an issue is because it's hard to contest the boss 4v5 if you lose one person, because the team doing the boss takes absolutely no damage. So just one person getting picked in the lane can equal a boss on Warhead. That's not the case in any other map, because the boss is a scary thing. Like, a 4v5 fight can still go wrong if the team with 5 people is tanking the boss. Not the case on Warhead. So, the solutions to the early game being unimpactful, and the boss plus 2 nukes can end the game when the enemy still has the keep all. What I would do is I would make the nuke radius decrease as the game goes on. And that does sound a bit counterintuitive, but stay with me. What that would mean is that late game nukes can no longer hit the wall and the fort, or the wall and the keep. So that has two purposes. That would make it harder to catch up in structures, which gives more weight to the early game. And that would also mean that you could no longer take keep and still have a 90% boss with only the 2 nukes. You would at least need a third, and even then it would probably take more damage, because the enemy team should have at least 1 cancel on one of these nukes. So that would make it much harder to end with that play I was describing earlier. To solve the last issue, the boss is the easiest in the game to take, but the strongest once captured. What I would do is I would give the locusts basic attacks. They don't have to hit hard, they don't have to be huge damage or anything. They can still, you know, kill themselves and explode and all that fun stuff. But just while they're alive and walking around, they can explode. That would mean basically 2 things. It would mean there's now a skill cap involved in trying to kill all the locusts and not get hit by any as fast as possible. So it raises the skill cap without specifically lowering the skill ceiling. And that would make it easier for the enemy to contest when at a disadvantage, because the boss is now doing damage to this team. That's now a big risk for them, since they're taking damage. And again, it makes it harder to catch up on structures just by taking this boss and marching down the lane. That also means the boss would be harder to take after a team fight. And obviously, again, I do think that you would need to nerf the scaling on that boss. It would make it much harder to core when a keep is exposed and you have 1 nuke. Not necessarily a good/bad thing. That's just a personal preference for me. So you can ignore that last change if you want. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more videos like this. And you can follow me on Twitter, which is @BakeryHeroes, or on heroeshearth.com. I will see you in the Nexus.